are talking today with Kristin Scaglione. She is with us. She's the co-founder of Firefly Forts, which is a luxury treehouse company that she founded with her husband, Mike. She's also the mom of 2 kids, and she recently launched an Instagram page called Live Big, Love Big as a place to honor Mike and move through the grieving process since his passing on March 1 of this year. Kristin, thank you so much for being with us today. And talking with us. We're talking primarily about anticipatory grief. I'm sure we may veer off in different directions, and that's fine too.
Yep.
So start by telling us a little bit about your husband, what kind of person he was, and what made him so special to you and your family.
Oh gosh. So my husband and I have been together for 27 years. We met in 9th grade English class. I used to keep journals in high school, and all of my high school journals are about this boy that I was in love with, who was Mike. So we started dating our senior year of high school and married 20 years, as you said, 2 children. He was this larger than life personality. He was fun and spontaneous and obnoxious at times, and just would say anything he was thinking, like didn't hold back, but in the very best way. The people that worked for him said that he brought sides out of them that they didn't know existed, because he really wasn't afraid to challenge people. Since his passing, some of his friends have even said he's the only one that would challenge me on my marriage, or was I being a good father? So he was just all sorts of good. Goofy, funny, just a really, really larger than life personality, which is kind of where the live big, love big comes from. He lived his life big. He loved big. And so, we're trying to honor him by continuing to live that way.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
When did you first learn of his diagnosis, and how did you all initially process that news?
So he was diagnosed in September of 2023. Looking back, we can trace his symptoms to December of 2022.
Oh, wow.
But a lot of his symptoms were really easy to blame on other things. He worked a lot. He exercised a lot, was training for a marathon. So a lot of the things that popped up, they were just easy to explain away. We kind of started diving more into some of his symptoms in the summer of 2023, and his blood work came back perfect, and his doctor told him that he was suffering from AGE syndrome. He said, "You're just getting old. You're just aging," which is infuriating, looking back, because he could have been diagnosed earlier, and, would that have bought us more time? Who knows? But he finally tested positive on one of his, we went down kind of an autoimmune rabbit hole, and his numbers were testing positive for mono, that he had mono at some point. And so he was having pain on the side where your spleen would be. And I had heard that mono could cause your spleen to burst. So I just sent him to the ER one day and said, maybe your spleen is inflamed. I didn't even go with him because I really didn't think anything was wrong. Long story short, they scanned him. He had hundreds of tumors in his body and was immediately admitted to the oncology ward. So, his cancer had spread everywhere. His brain alone had 42 tumors at diagnosis. So he, after, testing and all sorts of procedures, he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. He was a non-smoker, so that caught us off guard. But he had a genetic mutation that caused the cancer, and we'll never really know why that happened or where that came from.
Yeah. At what point during that, did you know from the beginning that it was terminal? I mean, or was there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If you Google stage 4 lung cancer, it's pretty obvious. But even before we Googled it, when we were inpatient on the oncology ward, every doctor that came in had this devastated look on their face and would always start with an "I'm sorry." And it really, at that point, felt like we weren't going to leave the hospital because he was that sick. His initial prognosis was 2 to 4 months, and we ended up getting 18.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Did you feel almost like I've heard of anticipatory grief and the concept
Mhm.
I get.
Yeah.
Was it, how quickly did that sort of sink in, and did you start to feel, and what does that feel like? What is it to you? What was that to you?
I mean, I feel like it feels like getting the wind knocked out of you in the very worst way. Yeah, I mean, we really didn't know how long he had. But it really felt like he wasn't going to make it to Christmas. So this is mid-September. Um, I think we immediately went into grieving, um, grieving that he was going to pass from this illness and most likely quickly. And, I think for all of us, it was devastating. I remember telling my children and telling them, I don't think Dad's going to make it to Christmas. And I really think, we did a massive prayer service a month after he was diagnosed, and almost 1,000 people showed up because we were just praying for a miracle, because we really felt like that's what we needed at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember I've been following along pretty much early on.
Yeah.
I remember you kind of alluding to the fact you didn't think he was going to make it to Christmas. And I just remember being so thrilled that he did, because, Christmas being that time of year, and, that.
Yeah, it was funny. I never, I was pretty public about his illness through our business page, and just through my own Instagram. I just shared because it was therapeutic for me, but I don't think I ever actually said the words it was terminal. I just couldn't say it, even though I knew it. I couldn't say it, and I alluded to it a lot, but it was just too hard to even put it out loud and put it out there in the world, because then that made it real,
Yeah. Yeah. What was that like for you on a daily basis, living in that sort of anticipatory state of grief?
It depended on the day. It depended on the month.
Because
Mike,
you got the two kids, and you still had to get up and get dressed and put the kids, together to get to school and things like that.
yeah, I would say the first 6 months were awful. It was just like waiting for the other shoe to drop. He was
Yeah.
losing weight. He wasn't doing well. He started walking with a cane, constant pain. It's kind of a blur, honestly. I mean, he was up. It was like having a newborn. He was up like 6 to 8 times a night, just pain meds, pain meds, pain meds. And then our oncologist that we ended up working with, we worked with a few before we found our oncologist. And so sorry.
Okay. My dog.
Everybody has dogs. Yeah, so our oncologist was definitely like meant to be our oncologist. If you need me to quiet them, let me know. And she pushed for a drug that really was not approved for Mike's illness. It was second line therapy, and she pushed for it to be first line. And by February, he was exercising again, running again. We were going to Disney World. We had all this hope. And so we were kind of thinking that maybe he was going to be the miracle. And I think even though we knew he was terminal, there's a lot of new stuff in the pipeline for his genetic mutation is super rare. He's like the 1% of the 1%. But his doctor had her hands in everything that was coming out. And so we were really just trying to make it from one medicine to the next. So I think, maybe from February to July of 2024, we weren't in a state of grief, because we were living in this place of hope.
Yeah.
And then in July, things got bad again. And that's when things kind of turned, July of 24. And we really never came back from that.
Did you and Mike talk openly about the fact of his eventual passing, or was that too heavy to discuss? Or
we didn't talk about it at first. He couldn't go there. And so I didn't want him to go there, so we didn't talk about it. We would touch on it, but we didn't talk about it. And then I would say once August came around, it became very clear that that was the direction we were most likely headed. And, I think I oftentimes have conversations with people, whether it's harder to lose someone suddenly or slowly.
Yeah.
And I think that could probably be debated all day long. But I think for me, knowing that he was terminal was, I don't want to say a gift, but once we decided that that's where this was headed and we were accepting of it, it allowed us to talk about things that you don't get to discuss with someone if you lose them suddenly. And so we were able to, I just shared this recently with someone, I asked him one time, when we miss you, what do you want us to do when we miss you? Is there anything you want us to do to kind of honor you? And Mike loved pizza. He wanted to own a pizza truck one day. And so he said, when you miss me, I want you to eat a pizza. And so that's become this kind of, I shared that with a lot of his friends and family. And so this hashtag Pizza for Mike started. And so anytime anyone is missing him, they order a pizza and they'll usually post it and do hashtag Pizza for Mike. But I knew exactly how he wanted his funeral to be. I knew exactly, what he didn't want. He didn't want us in black. I knew nothing was left unsaid. And so that was a gift, and so we did start talking about it. And I think it depended on the day on whether he was willing to go there. And there are still things I wish I would have done, knowing, like I tried to get him to put together a book, like an All About You book. He could never do that. But I wanted him to have it to leave it to the kids. But yeah, I think when you know someone is terminal, you can, mentally prepare for it and do all the things that when you lose someone suddenly, you're not able to do.
Yeah. In terms of your kids, I can't fathom what those conversations must have been like. If you were to offer any advice for somebody who may be having to think about having those conversations, what do you offer there?
I don't know that I can give advice on this. We did talk to a grief counselor before we told the kids, which I was extremely grateful for. Ours was through the church, but I'm sure you can find one anywhere. But she gave us advice on what to say and what not to say. She was very adamant about being direct and, don't say, she said, you need to use the word die. You need to use the word death, especially for my daughter who was 8 at the time, someone passing on or going to heaven. Even still that might not resonate with a child. We just had to be very direct. And I remember telling them and saying to her, do you understand what I just told you? And she said, yes. And I, had to say to her, that means dad's going to die. Right. And, I think they knew. I think that was important. I think they needed to know that, yes, we were still praying for a miracle. And yes, we were still going to live in a place of hope, but that according to science, he was not going to get better.
Yeah. So grief doesn't start and end at the funeral. What has been surprising to you about grief during these early days since his passing?
I'm learning that everybody grieves differently. Mm-hmm. I think I was numb for the first 6 to 8 weeks. I'm only 3 months out. I'm sure I'm still a little numb. Mike was in hospice for a week and that was pretty traumatic. And so I think that maybe there was some PTSD. And so I didn't really cry and I really felt like there was something wrong with me.
What was traumatic about the hospice scenario? I'm sure the whole thing was traumatic, but.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, just at that point, I guess we slowly watched Mike deteriorate for 18 months, but it just snowballed really quick in those final weeks.
Yeah.
And we went by ambulance at the hospital, and ended up getting checked into the hospice at the hospital, which was not in our plan. He had wanted to pass it home, and it just medically got to a point where I couldn't care for him at home, and it progressed quicker than we thought. And so my plan wasn't going well, or as we had talked about. And I think by the time we got to the hospital, he was pretty much unconscious for the rest of that time. My son, who is 14, took me by surprise. And when he came into the room, said, I'm not leaving. So he stayed bedside for 7 days with me and Mike, which ended up being a really beautiful, in a really sad week. It was that part of it was really beautiful. We had some beautiful moments together. But it's just, you never can prepare yourself to watch someone take their last breath. So,
Yeah.
And to have your kids, my daughter wasn't in the room, but my son was. And so to watch him watch that, broke me.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any, I know you said the pizzas, what sort of, do you have any like routines or rituals that you and the kids do as a way to honor him?
Not yet. I just try to talk about him a lot. Kids grieve differently than we do, and especially when they're younger, it comes in unexpected ways and at unexpected times, and sometimes you would never know they lost their dad, and so that can kind of throw me for a loop.
Yeah.
But we just try to talk about him a lot. We don't really have any routines or traditions or anything like that yet. Father's Day is coming up. I don't know how we will handle that, but we just always say his name and bring up memories. And, I try to show them it's okay to be sad and it's okay to cry. I had a friend who lost her dad, and she said her mom must have grieved behind closed doors because she never saw her mom cry, and it made her feel like she couldn't cry. And so I'm trying to say to the kids, I'm having a really hard day. I'm really sad today. But, I think back to the anticipatory grief, I think for kids, that is helpful. If you were to ask my son, he would tell you, I lost my dad a long time ago. And so, if he had lost the dad that was outside shooting hoops with him and had him one day and didn't have him the next, I think that would have been much different. But there were parts of Mike that just slowly disappeared as he got sicker. And so it allowed us to kind of slowly let go of those things one at a time almost. We just got to slowly, and for my daughter, it was, he eventually ended up in a wheelchair, and then he was in a wheelchair for 5 months. We just kind of get used to this next new version of him. And so I think by the time he passed, we were so, I don't want to say sick of, that's not the right word, but we had seen him suffer and we had seen him in pain for so long. It didn't make it easier, but I don't know, but maybe in a way it did, because we just kept seeing him slowly lose the Mike that we knew and loved.
Do you feel like that period of the anticipatory grief that you, what were kind of the key, did you learn things that you'll carry with you through life? I mean, obviously the live big, love big is one huge one, but that is how he lived his life. So,
I mean, I think just through grief, I've definitely learned what I would and wouldn't do if I have a friend go through this same thing. I mean, there's a way to support someone going through this, and then there's a way to not. And people are all really well intentioned, and so you can't get mad at them. But I think I've learned how to be a good friend to others that go through this. I think.
What does that look like? What does being a good friend to somebody who's going through this look like?
My biggest takeaway, I would say there's two. I think when anyone's going through anything, it's easy to say, give me a call if you need anything. I'm here. If you want me to run to the store, or if you want me to watch your kids, just let me know. But when you are living in the reality of being a caretaker, knowing you're going to lose someone you love, you don't have the capacity to think about, well, Jen said that if I needed her, the people that really stood out to me are the ones that did without asking, and that would, just show up and take my kids, or just bring a meal without asking, instead of asking what you can do, just doing.
Do it. Yeah.
It's just too much to try, because you get so much support, it's overwhelming, and you don't think to reach out to all the people. You forget who has even said that they would be there for you. So the people that just do really stand out. And then I think since losing Mike, and I've shared this with you before, I think that there's people that lean out and there's people that lean in, because people don't want to make you sad, and they don't know what to say. And so sometimes they just don't reach out, or they just don't say anything. There was someone that I spent time with after he passed, and she completely avoided the subject of Mike. I think she thought she was distracting me, but I was devastated. I just wanted to talk about him. Yeah. And so I think when you lose someone, you want to talk about them, and you want to say their name. And by not giving someone that's grieving the opportunity to do that, you're not supporting them. You're actually making things worse. Yeah. You can't make them sadder. They're already sad. And so, even if you say the wrong thing, it's better than not saying anything at all. And it's surprising that there's some people that just back away for fear, either because death makes them uncomfortable, or because they fear hurting you even more.
Yeah. If you could speak directly to someone who's just beginning to walk down this road, how would you, or if you could talk to yourself, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, what advice, or are there any tools they could put in their emotional toolbox, or anything to steel themselves for the road they're about to embark on?
That's a question I should have prepared for. I had someone say to me, when someone offers to help, take the help. I think that is key to surviving. Whether you're taking a caregiver or you've just lost someone, you just have to humble yourself and take the help. I think I had 8 months of a meal train, maybe longer. But it was helpful, and it allowed me to spend time with my children and time with my husband when that's where I needed to be. So I think taking the help, I think counseling is important. If you don't have friends you can talk to, finding someone you can talk to. And I think, we just started living intentionally, and your priorities become very, very clear and I think it happens naturally. But, I always used to say to my kids, and then this became like what we lived by when Mike got sick. If you interact with someone and you leave the interaction feeling worse than you did coming into it, then that's not someone that you need in your life right now. And so we really kind of just kept the people close that filled us up. Yeah. And that supported us. And then the ones that didn't, we just kind of let those slip away, at least for the time being, because we needed to be surrounded by love and support, or else I don't know how we would have gotten through it. I'm blown away by the way that people loved on us.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, I'm thankful that you are willing to share so freely with us. And I'm excited to kind of follow along on your journey. Excited may not be the best word, but I think that your new Instagram page is raw and honest, and I think that there is such value in that. So I'm thankful that you're opening up in that way. So
thank you. Yeah, I don't think everyone grieves the same. So I want to, I don't know if other widows will find it's helpful or not, but I do think that I think it's okay to give grief a voice. Mm-hmm. And I think the worst thing you can do is hold your pain in.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to create a safe space for myself to grieve, to honor Mike, and then to connect with other people that are grieving and,
It
maybe
feels like
inspire them.
something that's gonna maybe take on a life of its own is what it feels like.
Yeah, I don't know where it's going to go, but we are trying to live our lives the way Mike lived his. And I keep telling the kids, that's how we will honor dad. I will not sit inside and be sad all day. We will, Mike prayed for a miracle. And had he gotten that miracle, he would have been living his life bigger than ever, but he didn't get that chance. And so we will live a big life for him and in honor of him. Because that's what he would want for us. And so I hope that I can inspire other people to honor their loved ones that they've lost by living that way too.
Yeah. I suspect you will do just that.
So,
Kristin, thank you. Thank you very much.
thank you.